I'm getting this to you a day late, a dollar short. I don't think so, but thank you for your patience. I was hanging out with a friend in Vegas. He needed to get his mind off of some BS badly, and he was like, I've never been to Vegas. Do you want to go to Vegas? I was like, dude, I got your back. Let's go to Vegas. Let's get your mind off of it. Because that's what friends do. Friends will have your back even if they miss the pre-embargo screening to the first James Cameron film in 13 years. Now The Way of Water is out. It's time to punch on and do that only monetizable skill I have. Talk. So Avatar: The Way of Water is the sequel to Avatar. It's been many years for us, many years for them. Jake Sully now has a family. Life is great, but the Sky People have returned, so let the clash commence. Also learning the way of water. That's also a thing in here. Now let's be honest and address it. Avatar, it gets a lot of shit. But I've never been there mentally with the movie. I thought Avatar was great in 2009. I've watched it since then many times. I watched it recently to brush up for this movie. Yeah, Dances with Smurfs, don't give a fuck. I think it's great. I apologize for none of it. But it'll be interesting to see how The Way of Water plays out, since the landscape, the cinematic landscape, is now different in 2022 than it was in 2009. And after watching the movie, I can say a couple things. One, my faith in James Cameron, I feel, has paid off, because I thought he crushed it with this one. And two, that might actually work out for this movie, because it's easy to see big budget movies being this industrial grade studio cash grab, because that's kind of what we see with big budget movies now. But I don't think that's the case with The Way of Water. So first of all, technologically speaking, this movie is head and shoulders above anything you've ever seen in your life. So many times I was watching this, I was like, it's easy to forget it's CGI. There've been a couple times I've met fans and they're like, dude, do you really think Avatar: The Way of Water looks great? Because I don't think the trailer visually, I don't think it looks any better than the previous Avatar movie. I just think we've hit that phase in life where the only way to see the detail and the resolution is to see it on a bigger screen. I guess that's pretty smart for 20th century studios, which is Disney. Let's just be honest about it. Because I've watched the trailer on a little screen and I've watched it on the big screen. On the big screen, it does look better. At first, when you're in the forest, you're like, okay, it does look good, but I've seen this before. But when they get to the water stuff and they're hanging out the water civilization, it's unlike anything you've ever seen. James Cameron in The World of Pandora, the Avatar movies, they've always had that. They've always had this bonds between the people of the world and the animals of the world. Very circle of life thing going on. But it's like James Cameron's very conscious of the fact that being in the world of Pandora is part of the fun, is part of the charm, it's part of the glory of the movie. So he gives you more than a few moments of these awe-inspiring scenes where it's just like, let's just have the audience take it in. In fact, let's have characters take it in too, because it does look that fucking incredible. This movie does the high frame rate, which is essentially doubling the frame rate. I don't think it's the only format you can watch the movie in. I'm sure you can find it in lower frame rate. Not all projectors can do that. Point is, it's something that the first Hobbit movie did, and then everyone who saw the movie early was like, wow, that was weird. And then strangely, for the next two screenings, it wasn't in high frame rate, at least not in Seattle. Maybe it's the technology's advanced in the subsequent 10 years since, but I actually enjoyed it in this movie. I thought it worked a lot better for Avatar: Way of Water. I thought it was a lot more immersive, sometimes to its detriment, absolutely. A couple scenes in particular I could think of. Really, just one. This scene where we're in space and it's turning and I'm like, yeah, the camera's turning. That looks great. Yeah, it's so immersive. My brain is telling me we're spinning and I'm kind of getting nauseous. Also, a thing that this movie does really well that a lot of movies that have that time gap need to do, you know, when they're dealing with a couple generations, is have both generations be relevant and have the story use both optimally. Usually when dealing with that conundrum, we're talking about universes and worlds that have been around actively for a while. This is just simply the first James Cameron movie since the previous James Cameron movie. Enough time has passed where now he needs to deal with that. Because he saw the 12-year gap between Titanic and Avatar and he was like, I can beat that. 13 years hence, here we are. But I did think this movie did a great job at using the two generations, Neytiri, Jake Sully, and their kids, and having them all work, you know, having them all optimized. I felt like Neytiri did get a little more sidelined in this movie than she was in the previous movie. She was a huge part of the previous movie, but it more revolves around Jake and the fact that he is this leader, but now he's also a parent. In the previous movie, Jake was like, oh yeah, I'm a military leader. Last Shadow, baby, it's fine. I'll help them all fight. But now he's like, I don't want my kids to get hurt and die in fighting, so I'm going about it differently. But then his kids are like, we want to fight, we want to help, so they're going on their quest. I would say the kids are actually in the forefront in here. It is building the story. I mean, there's like 6 planned Avatar sequels. They're definitely going to stick around and become more prominent as time goes on. This was the film where we had to give a shit about them, and I thought James Cameron did a good job with that. I mean, there were a couple of intense scenes where I was like, see, this is why I like Avatar. They're not just 9-foot-tall Smurfs, there's peril happening, that dude's in danger, and I care. There was a bit of familiarity in a couple scenes, just in the fact that when I was sitting down to watch this movie, I remember thinking, this is gonna feel so different than the first movie, because a huge part of the first movie was Jake Sully training to be a Na'vi, and then he becomes one of the people, and that's the plot of the movie. And to my surprise, it's called Way of Water, so I shouldn't have been too surprised, but in its execution, Jake and his family are hanging out with this Na'vi civilization that's very water-based. Their bodies have evolved to use water in their culture and their civilization, as the Na'vi we saw in the previous film evolved to use the forest. All of it seems really well thought out and executed with passion. So that sense of learning a new culture is actually in this movie as well. It's just, there's no flip like that in the first one where it's like, oh man, I guess these folks aren't so bad, I'm gonna help them. No, they're always the good guys. There's this good guys hanging out with good guys. There is a bit of that high school tension though. And I do want to give props to composer Simon Franglen for stepping in after the late great James Horner passed away. Some big shoes to fill. And to be fair, there were a couple of moments where a track was either reused or it was just recomposed for this movie, but it's the same track from the first movie. Like that song when Home Tree gets bombed. As Home Tree's down, all the Na'vi are crying and they're freaking out. And you know, that tune that's very memorable from the first movie, that same song plays in this movie. I was like, are you just reusing tracks? You're just gonna reuse it? But this sounds like a James Cameron call to me, not a Simon Franglen call. I want to give props to Simon Franglen because music's very important in the world of Pandora, and I felt he did a great job recapturing it. The movie's a little over 3 hours long, which is pretty lengthy, but I feel like it's an earned runtime. It does make me think, like, wait, James Cameron always has director's cuts. Is there a director's cut? Is there going to be a special edition of this? Do you have a 4-hour cut of Way of Water? We'll see, I guess. And in the end, I gotta say, Avatar: The Way of Water is proof that if you're playing the odds, you never bet against James Cameron. Honestly, if you didn't like the previous Avatar movie, I don't think this is gonna win you over. But for fans of Avatar, I think Way of Water is gonna be a great next chapter. Once again, Pandora's a world in a movie that you're not just watching in a movie, you're living it. James Cameron's a director that gets that 2022 comic book movie MCU budget, but he uses it to keep that old school movie-going experience alive. His movies feel like passion projects still. It's actually a very unique movie-going experience, James Cameron films. He's a guy who does his own thing, wants to entertain the living shit out of people, and does it in a way where you're like, yeah, movies used to feel like this, and it's really awesome to see in 2022. Maybe eventually Avatar is going to feel that way. It's going to feel like that studio cash grab. Like I said, there are a few Avatar sequels planned out. I'd be shocked if he does all of them. And if they're successful enough, they're going to have spin-offs and Disney Plus series. There might eventually come a time where it just feels like soulless nonsense. But that time is not today. I felt Avatar: The Way of Water was a memorable experience in 2022. The visuals look unreal, it has a classic storytelling spirit about family at the center, and the last 45 minutes of this film is a satisfying action spectacle. Avatar: The Way of Water is awesome-tacular. It's like this. I was actually gonna give it Buy It on Blu-ray, and I just remembered I'm a grumpy old fuck now. I just want to kick my feet back and enjoy the shit out of this. So there you have it. Alright, so Avatar: The Way of Water. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Or what's your favorite James Cameron film? You can rank them if you want. That's always fun to do. Everyone loves lists. Fun to do, fun to read, fun to have, fun to make. But whatever you think, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.